Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Where to begin? Where to begin? Well, you've heard a good piece of the book of Esther in this lesson, but I'd like to go back to the beginning so that we can get a little bit of a framework for it. I don't know how many of you sit around reading the book of Esther out of the Bible, but it's in there, and it's one of those kind of books in the Bible that is shall we say, a tale, a story, so that even though maybe those things happened and maybe they didn't happen exactly the way that it says, because you can tell by the way the story is put together that it is for the purpose of sharing information, that the information that's being shared is to teach something that's much, much larger. So is it a true story? Yes, in a way it really is a true story, because it is teaching us a deeper truth, a larger truth. The story of Esther. We've gone through many beautiful, wonderful Bible women, and this one is one of them. I think she's just the favorite, because she is a Jewish woman whose parents have died and who is being watched over by her uncle, whose name is Mordecai. Mordecai is the leader of the Jewish people in this area that they live in. Now, the point of this story is not just about her being brave and doing a good thing. It's teaching us that we should do what God calls us to do. But that one line that Martha and I pick up on is perhaps you are in this position that you're in right now for a reason. In other words, God has a purpose for your life. And maybe sometimes when it's the most challenging thing that's happening, that's the very thing that God intended you to do, and that maybe your whole life was preparing you for that moment. It's also a story that teaches us and reminds us of something that I think we as Christians need to remember, because it's so easy for us to forget, and that is that the Jewish people, who are the very core of our Christianity, because Jesus was a Jewish person, and our faith comes out of Judaism, and half of our Bible, the Old Testament, is the Jewish Bible, it's a Hebrew Bible, is that these people have been in danger of annihilation right from the beginning. Just to give you an example or two. In the year 586, the Jewish people were taken out away from their home, from Israel, and they were sent into exile in Babylon. And they were never going to be able to come back again. And they could have lived without hope, but they kept their faith alive. And in 536, because of just some miraculous change in leadership, and that the King Cyrus of Persia that was in charge then didn't want to keep them, he thought he'd just sent them back, and they rebuilt the lost temple. So the Jewish people were alive again. That was so long ago, 536 BCE. Then, in another example is around 163, around that time, a vicious leader named Antiochus Epiphanes IV, he decided that he was going to destroy the Jewish people. Genocide, kill them all. Don't let them, if they're alive, don't let them keep kosher. Don't let them keep their religion. Take it away from them. Don't let them have circumcision. Don't let them pray together. Don't let them keep separate from us. And somehow they survived that. Then in the year 70, this is it. Now, our year 70, CE, AD, we used to call it. Again, the Jewish people are thrown out of Jerusalem. The temple is destroyed. In between that time, and I'd say 1939, which we all know what that is, in between those times there have been pogroms, and in many, many countries, deliberate intention to try to kill all the Jews. And then Hitler was the culmination of that. We hope the end of it, but it wasn't. It was the end, but killed 6 million Jews, and somehow they still survived. This story today is the same kind of a story, and it was written so far back, and to think You know, I mean, it means that if you're a Jewish person, now you're living in the United States, for example, we're seeing anti-Semitism rise. I don't know about Canada. Europe, same thing. It comes up. Why? Because there are people that will not bow down to Caesar. They will not bow down to Herod, and Herod's one of theirs, not really, but they will not bow down to the king because they only bow down to one, and that's God, Almighty God. And that's something that we don't want to just take for granted, because that's about everything that we're about. So now we have this young woman named Esther, who's very beautiful, and has an uncle named Mordecai. Nothing particular going on in their life. They live in a kingdom that is run by a king named Ahasuerus, and Ahasuerus is in charge of 127 provinces from Ethiopia to some other places. Huge, Egypt, I think it is. Huge amount of land. He's a very, very powerful king. Did this person exist? Well, they don't have anybody by that name in the history books, but they think he might have been some other ones, and they're just changing the name. This king is extremely powerful, and he can do anything he wants. But he has all these men that are helping him, his advisors, and he tends to take their advice maybe a little too much. But sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. So here we have this king, and he decides that he's celebrating the anniversary of his power, and he decides to throw a party. This is where we begin to see that this is a tale, a story. He has a party, and he says, I'm going to throw a party, and it's going to be 180 days of celebration. Think we can handle that? 180 days of celebration? And it's going to be a drinking party. Yeah, and they're going to have an open bar. It doesn't use the word open bar, but that's what it means, okay? Yeah, and then there's going to be a finishing up party of 7 days after the 180 days, and also the women are separate, but they're going to have their own party in another place with this queen whose name is Vashti. So right at the end of this party, after they've been celebrating, and it says in the Bible, he was merry with wine. We know what that means. He says, I have the most beautiful wife. My queen Vashti is the most beautiful of all women, and I am going to bring her forward to show you how beautiful she is, and she's going to be wearing her crown. And there are some traditions that take note that it didn't say what else she was going to be wearing. But anyway, either way, she was going to be paraded in front of the men to show off how beautiful she was. And Vashti, I guess we could say, is probably the first woman we know of in history who's a feminist. She says, no, I'm not going. Well, the king goes to his advisors, what shall I do, what shall I do? And the advisors say, well, you've got to get rid of her. She can't be your queen anymore, because if you let her keep on being your queen, then all the men in the kingdom are going to have problems with their wives disobeying them. So he figures, I guess he better do that. So they say, you've got to find yourself a new queen. Now you have to find the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. Now it's starting to sound like, I don't know, Cinderella or something, you know, Cinderella, Snow White, the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. And they all go out looking for her. And they look everywhere. And of course, they're going to bring these women back to the kingdom, back to the city where the king is, but they're going to keep them away for 1 year. And during this 1 year, they're going to have 1 year of daily beauty treatments. Yes, it's in the Bible. 1 year of beauty treatments to make sure that they're really beautiful enough for the king. So, of course, they find the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, and of course, it's our Esther. Esther is so beautiful that when she comes back to the palace, she doesn't even need the beauty treatments because she's beautiful already. And all of these stories that we have about how beautiful the women are, it's always our women. Our women are the most beautiful of all women. So there she is. She's chosen. It doesn't say whether she wants to do this or not, but Mordecai tells her to go, and she's a very obedient young woman and realizes that it's important, so she goes. She is chosen by the king to be his queen. Then she becomes Queen Esther. And Queen Esther is the most beautiful queen. Now everything's going along okay, except that there's a very, very bad man in the kingdom. His name is Haman. I have to stop for a minute and tell you a little little side story, and that is that around the time I was in seminary, I attended the synagogue occasionally because I was studying Hebrew, and I liked to go and practice my Hebrew. So I would go to their service on Friday night, and I happened to go on this one Friday night. It was a rather small synagogue, and the rabbi looked a little nervous when I came in, and he came over to me and he said, it's going to be a little different tonight. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's kind of hard to explain. It's Purim. We're celebrating Queen Esther, and this is the day that we all celebrate that. And we tell the story of Esther, and well, I'm not going to tell you any more about what we're going to do, but just relax and enjoy it, and don't worry, we're not being sacrilegious, he said. And I thought, what are they going to do? And you know what it was? The people came in, some of them were wearing costumes, and a lot of them had noisemakers. You know those things that you fling around like this and they make a real rattly noise? Yeah. And so what happened was that he read the book of Esther, just like we were hearing it tonight, right from beginning to end. And every time they said the name Esther, everybody went, hooray! And every time they said the word Haman, because he was a bad villain, boo! And the rabbi had a stop sign. And he would let them boo as long as they liked, and then as soon as he thought it was time to go on with the story, up would come the stop sign and everybody would stop. And I just thought it was absolutely delightful. A delightful thing. So, Haman is the bad guy. Haman is a very, very bad man because he's only interested in himself. And he has the king's favor for a long time, but he is upset because the Jew Mordecai will not bow down to him, and he had made the arrangements with the king that he should get bowed down to by everybody, everywhere he went. So everybody bows down to him except Mordecai. He gets very upset, so he comes to the king and he says, Haman says, you've got to do something. You know, these Jewish people, they're all very selfish, and they don't care about you, and they don't obey you. They only obey their God. They won't obey you. And I think you should do something about it. The king's like, well, what do you think we should do? And Haman says, they should all be killed. Men, women, and children, all be killed, because these people do not obey you. And the king says, well, you know, he's kind of easily influenced, and so he says, okay, because he doesn't know that his wife, his beautiful wife Esther, is Jewish. She never told him. She never told him. So now, problem is arising that the Jewish people are all going to be killed. And Mordecai comes to Esther and he says, you've got to go to the king, you've got to tell the king. You heard that in the story. You've got to tell the king that he mustn't do this. Please get him to stop. And she says, I have no power. I can't go in unless he calls me. He hasn't called me 30 days. But she goes out all dressed up in the courtyard, beautiful, and he sees her and he allows her to come in. And he says to her, what do you want? Now, what would you think you'd say? Most of us would say, well, my people are going to be killed, please save them. Instead, she says, she's shrewd, she's wise, she's cool. She's trying to be cool. She says, I would like to invite you and Haman to a dinner party. Well, isn't that nice? He said, lovely, I would love that. So they come to the dinner party. And at the dinner party, he says, okay, I'll give you anything you want. And she said, I would like to have another party. Second party. Second party, Haman is getting more and more happy because he thinks this is wonderful that the queen is inviting him. And at the second party, the truth comes out, finally. The king says, I'll give you anything I want, to the half of my kingdom. Sounds like Herod and Salome, doesn't it? Half of my kingdom. And she said, I tell you, king, that I'm a Jewish person and all my people are going to be killed if you don't stop this. You've got to cancel your decree. And because it's one of those stories that likes to keep you on edge right to the end, the king says, oh, I'd love to do that, but I can't. I can't do it. Well, why not? He says, well, in this kingdom, you know, I have all these advisors, and the advisors tell me that once I've made a decree, it has to stand, no matter what. Can't be changed. Crazy, huh? crazy rules that don't make any sense. And boy, we have plenty of those in our lives, don't we? So, so she's thinking and thinking, and she said, well, what you could do is make another decree that our people can defend themselves, will be allowed and prepared to defend themselves. Oh, yes, that I can do. So she has now, at this point, saved her people. So when the day comes that they're all to be killed, of course, because it's one of those tales and probably just a story, instead of all the Jews being killed, all the enemies that are after them get killed, and the Jews live happily and celebrate Purim every year after that to remember one beautiful young woman who saved her people. And you remember what she said to Mordecai? If I perish, I perish. Reminds me of Paul saying, whether we live or whether we die, we belong to the Lord. There are times in our life, we're pretty lucky, most of us, that we haven't had to live in war times. I'm sure some of you have, but most of us haven't been in the war, in the middle of it. But when the moment comes, we need to remember who we belong to, like Esther did. We belong to God. And if a people are only staying separate because they are being obedient to God and because they are doing God's will as best they know it, then that's a good thing. We need to love them. We need to remember the danger that they live in every day. Even when things are going well, they always wonder if it's going to turn. I've spoken with a lot of people that have said that to me. And we don't feel that way because we're in a society where, maybe Christianity, the churches aren't all full as this one, but still, it's still basically a Christian society. So when people belong to other faiths, we need to understand that if they're being true to their faith, that we need to respect that too. Esther is a great role model, and we're going to go and study her a little bit more after the service. And I think that it's a wonderful story in the Bible, and I will tell you now that I'm finished telling you the story, that there isn't one word about God in the story, not even one word. It's the only book in the Bible that doesn't say the word God, and yet it's all about God. But she does ask her people to fast and pray, remember, before she goes in to see the king. So she is a person of deep, deep faith, and she is following that faith and trusting in God, that God's will be done. And that's all we can do. Try to be faithful and wish with all our hearts and pray that God's will be done. Amen.